The scorching Libyan desert offered no mercy. On the morning of May 27, 1942, beneath an unrelenting sun south of Tobruk, near a stretch of trackless sand known as Bur Hakim, German tank formations were caught in an unforeseen dilemma. What emerged from the British defensive line was unlike anything they had encountered. A monumental silhouette, nearly 3 meters high, advanced slowly across the shimmering landscape. From its forward hull, a weapon extended, a caliber that German intelligence had insisted was not deployed on any Allied armored vehicle. A 75mm round tore through the immense distances and ripped apart a Panzer III, then another, then yet a third. Crews, who had come to expect an unchallengeable superiority in their vehicles, perished inside the suddenly vulnerable machines. One Wehrmacht officer would later describe the revelation as absolute. The engagement had fundamentally altered the conflict's calculus in a single morning. This unfamiliar American machine, a deliberate compromise, would come to be known as the M3 Grant. Its form was ungainly, and it presented significant vulnerabilities, yet its initial impact was undeniable. Urgent dispatches began to move rapidly back to Berlin, reporting a new Allied tank capable of destroying German panzers from ranges where their own guns offered no effective reply. What the German command could not know then, what almost no one in the Allied ranks fully grasped, was that a far more profound response, a weapon of truly terrifying power, was already deep in development. For over a year, German engineers had been secretly working on what they believed would be the ultimate tank, a 70-ton behemoth equipped with a formidable 88mm gun. They had named this project simply the Tiger. This Tiger was envisioned to dominate every battle, to crush all opposing armor without fear, to secure victory through sheer technological advantage. This, however, would not be its final outcome. The story of these two tanks reveals a shared origin in military urgency, born from the stark realization that existing armored forces were inadequate. One represented a hurried solution, a stopgap measure designed to gain time. The other was an engineering marvel, yet its very perfection would ultimately contribute to the larger strategic defeat. To grasp the path that led to the Tiger, one must first understand the severe deficiencies plaguing Allied tank forces years earlier. In June of 1940, with the unexpected collapse of France, American military planners confronted a sobering reality. Their primary combat vehicle, the M2 medium tank, mounted only a 37mm gun. This armament was already proving entirely insufficient against the panzers that had overrun Western Europe in just 6 weeks. The standard German Panzer III's frontal armor simply deflected the smaller American shells. Any engagement would effectively send American tankers into battle with a near-certain grim fate. The preferred solution, installing a 75mm gun in a fully traversable turret, was obvious. But the United States industrial infrastructure faced a critical limitation. No facility possessed the capacity to forge turret rings large enough for such a weapon. The retooling and engineering required at least 2 years, a time frame the ongoing conflict simply would not permit. The fight was happening now. Faced with this immediate constraint, the decision was made for a stopgap design, a tank never intended as a war winner, but merely to hold the line until superior designs could emerge. Work began at the Rock Island Arsenal in July 1940. The resulting design was unconventional. The powerful 75mm gun was fixed in a sponson on the hull's right side, allowing only a limited 30-degree traverse. A secondary, smaller 37mm gun was placed in a more conventional rotating turret atop the hull. The tank thus carried 2 primary weapons, reflecting the designer's uncertainty about whether infantry support or anti-armor capability would prove more critical in the emerging conflict. The first prototype moved under its own power on March 13, 1941, initiating a rapid production effort. Within months, 5 major American manufacturers, including Chrysler's Detroit Tank Arsenal and American Locomotive, were constructing M3s around the clock. This urgent mobilization underscored the growing industrial might of the United States. The M3, weighing nearly 28 metric tons, presented a formidable, if unwieldy, presence. Its towering height, over 3 meters, made it highly visible across open terrain. American crews sometimes referred to it as the Iron Cathedral due to its imposing profile. Soviet crews, who received over 1,300 minutes and 3 seconds through the perilous Lend-Lease convoys braving Arctic U-boat threats, had a starker, more cynical name, the Grave for Six Brothers, a grim nod to its 6-person crew and their perceived chances of survival when a German shell inevitably found its mark. The British were the first to deploy the M3 in combat, utilizing a modified version. British engineer Leslie Carr devised a lower-profile turret, eliminating the tall machine gun cupola that made the American variant such an obvious target. This modification also incorporated a vital number 19 wireless radio in a rear turret bustle, allowing British tank crews to communicate effectively with each other and with headquarters, a crucial tactical advantage the initial American M3s lacked. To prevent confusion, the British adopted a naming convention for American tanks based on U.S. generals. The standard American variant became the Lee, after Confederate General Robert E. Lee, while their modified version became the Grant, honoring Union General Ulysses S. Grant. The Grant stood roughly 30 centimeters shorter than the Lee, a seemingly small detail that could mean the difference between ambushing and being ambushed, and often life or death, in the flat, featureless expanse of North Africa. M3 Grants arrived in Egypt by late January 1942. They were assigned to the 4th Armored Brigade of the 7th Armored Division, formations already hardened by the intense desert fighting against Erwin Rommel's Afrika Korps. Regiments such as the 8th King's Royal Irish Hussars and the 3rd and 5th Royal Tank Regiments, all veteran units having endured significant losses in earlier engagements, were now equipped with these new machines. They understood the capabilities they had been granted. For the impending Battle of Gazala, the British 8th Army deployed 167 Grants, vehicles that would soon redefine the desert conflict. Prior to the Grant's arrival, British tanks in North Africa were exclusively armed with the 2-pounder gun, a 40mm weapon firing only armor-piercing rounds. This left them without any high-explosive capability, severely limiting their effectiveness against concealed German anti-tank guns, which routinely decimated British armor. The German 88mm anti-aircraft gun, repurposed as a tank killer, was particularly devastating, capable of destroying British tanks from over 2,000 meters. British tanks, conversely, needed to close to within 500 meters to even have a chance of penetrating German armor. The resulting casualty ratios were grim. For every German tank destroyed, the British often lost 3 or 4 of their own. Crews were acutely aware of these odds, yet they continued to fight, enduring the loss of their comrades in a conflict where there seemed no alternative. Then came the Grant. On the morning of May 27, 1942, Rommel launched his flanking maneuver south of Burhakem. His Panzer units swept around the British defensive flank, anticipating a repeat of earlier successes, expecting to overwhelm the positions from behind. Instead, they encountered the M3 Grants of the 4th Armored Brigade. The ensuing engagement yielded a level of destruction that far exceeded German expectations. The Grant's 75mm main gun could engage German Panzer IIIs and early Panzer IVs from ranges where their 50mm guns were simply ineffective. For the first time, British tankers found themselves able to fire first, strike with decisive power, and maintain their barrage while German return fire fell harmlessly short. Crucially, the 75mm gun could also fire high-explosive shells, finally providing a means to counter the German anti-tank guns, those deadly 88s that had for 2 years operated with impunity from concealed positions. German armored forces faced a new, lethal counterfire. Hans von Luck, commanding the 3rd Panzer Reconnaissance Battalion of the 21st Panzer Division, would later consider the M3 superior to the Panzer IV in several key respects. He himself was wounded by a Grant shell that very day, carried from the battlefield as his own reconnaissance vehicles burned around him. while the British also suffered severe losses. The 8th Hussars were reduced to just 2 operational tanks, and the 3rd Royal Tank Regiment lost approximately 14. The psychological impact on German forces far outweighed the immediate casualty figures. Rommel acknowledged this himself, writing of a British surprise awaiting us, the new Grant tank. Yet, a crucial historical detail often escapes notice. German intelligence possessed prior knowledge of the M3 Grant. A Panzer Army Africa report, dated May 20th, 1942, a mere week before Gazala, provided a detailed description of M3 tanks in British service, even estimating 144 were operational and noting specifics of crew composition and ammunition issues. The surprise, therefore, was not the existence of the tank, but the unexpected effectiveness of its combat performance. The Panzer Army's battle report simply described the M3 as highly resistant. German tankers, accustomed to battlefield dominance, suddenly faced an adversary that could inflict lethal damage before they could even return fire. This unexpected shift in combat reality challenges the common narrative that the M3 Grant directly spurred the development of the Tiger tank. That compelling notion, suggesting Allied innovation forced a German reaction, is historically inaccurate. The Tiger did not emerge as a direct response to the M3 Grant. It represented the culmination of a German heavy tank program initiated in 1937, 5 years before the M3 ever saw combat. Its origins lay in a concept known as the breakthrough tank, designed to shatter enemy defensive lines and contend with formidable French heavy tanks like the Char B1 and Saumur S-35, which had presented significant problems for German forces in 1940, their thick armor shrugging off shells that should have been fatal. The program progressed through various designs over the intervening years: the DW1, DW2, VK 30.01, and VK 36.01. Each iteration growing heavier and more powerful as German engineers meticulously refined their vision of an ultimate armored vehicle. This was not an emergency crash program, but a methodical development process that predated the war itself. The true catalyst for the Tiger's final form was not an American tank, but a Soviet one. On June 24th and 25th, 1941, merely days after the launch of Operation Barbarossa, German forces near WWII in Lithuania encountered a new and terrifying reality. A single Soviet heavy tank, a KV-1, successfully held elements of the 6th Panzer Division at bay for almost 22 hours. German 37mm anti-tank guns, the standard Pak 36, which crews had already nicknamed the Door Knocker for its inability to penetrate enemy armor, proved utterly useless. Shells ricocheted off its thick hide like rain. German engineers later examined the impact marks, confirming that nothing in their arsenal could stop this Soviet monster from the front. Even a Panzer III, firing tungsten core ammunition at a T-34 from as close as 20 to 50 meters, reported no noticeable effect. The T-34, though smaller than the KV-1, was faster and far more numerous, capable of simply driving through German defensive positions that would have halted any other tank. This was the profound crisis that accelerated the Tiger's development, not the M3 Grant, which would not see combat for another 11 months. The timeline definitively debunks the conventional narrative. On May 26, 1941, the German Army issued the VK 45.01 specification for a 45-ton tank armed with an 88mm gun. This occurred 1 full month before Operation Barbarossa began, demonstrating that German planners were already preparing for a war against heavy tanks even before encountering Soviet armor. By August 7, 1941, the German Armaments Ministry officially applied the name Tiger to the project. Later that November, the Panzer Commission, dispatched to the Eastern Front, personally assessed the T-34 and KV-1 threat, confirming their worst fears. German tanks were outmatched, and the Tiger was desperately needed. On April 20, 1942, Tiger prototypes from both Henschel and Porsche were presented to Adolf Hitler at his Rassenburg headquarters. The date was Hitler's birthday, and he had personally demanded their readiness. The Henschel prototype was completed with just 40 minutes to spare before its transport. Nothing, it seemed, was more vital to him than witnessing his new wonder weapon in action. It is worth noting that May 27, 1942, when the M3 Grant first saw action at Gazala, was 5 weeks after Hitler had already observed the Tiger prototypes. The M3 Grant thus exerted no influence on the Tiger's development, a fact rendered impossible to dispute by the chronological record. The Tiger was designed to meet a pre-existing German heavy tank requirement, a need profoundly validated and urgently accelerated by encounters with Soviet armor, not American. Two rival firms, Henschel, led by chief designer Erwin Itters, and Porsche, under the legendary Ferdinand Porsche, received the VK 45.01 specification. Both designs incorporated the same Krupp design turret and the powerful 88mm gun. The fundamental difference lay in their drivetrain concepts. Porsche proposed an innovative gasoline-electric system, where two V10 engines powered Siemens generators, which in turn drove electric motors connected to the tracks. While technologically ambitious and promising smooth power delivery and simpler steering, it also proved deeply problematic. Henschel opted for a conventional approach, utilizing a massive Maybach engine paired with a mechanical transmission. This was less revolutionary, but far more reliable. Its maintenance would not demand electrical engineering expertise from German tank crews. The April 20th demonstration revealed problems with both prototypes, neither truly ready for combat. Henschel's design, however, demonstrated greater dependability. The Army selected Henschel for 4 compelling reasons. First, Porsche's electric drive consumed vast quantities of copper, a strategic material critically needed for U-boat construction, creating a direct conflict for scarce resources. Second, the gasoline-electric system was plagued by chronic overheating and frequent breakdowns, a fatal flaw in the brutal, unforgiving conditions of the Eastern Front, where reliability often equated to survival. Third, the electric motors proved less responsive than mechanical transmissions, resulting in inferior maneuverability. Fourth, conventional drivetrains were considerably simpler to maintain in field conditions, as workshops already equipped to service Maybach engines were common throughout the Wehrmacht. Overly confident in his design, Ferdinand Porsche had already ordered 100 chassis built before the final decision. 91 of these were eventually converted into the Ferdinand tank destroyer, later renamed the Elephant, and dispatched to Kursk in July 1943, where they were devastated by Soviet infantry exploiting their lack of defensive machine guns. Only one complete Porsche Tiger ever saw combat, serving as a command vehicle before its destruction in July 1944. On August 4, 1942, the first production Tiger I rolled off the Henschel assembly line in Kassel. It weighed 57 metric tons and mounted the formidable 88mm KWK 36L/56 gun, a derivative of the anti-aircraft weapon that had already instilled fear among Allied tankers across 2 continents. Its frontal armor measured 100 millimeters thick, with upper hull and turret sides at 80 millimeters. On paper, this was unequivocally the most powerful tank in the world. The Tiger's 88mm gun was indeed terrifying. It could penetrate 120 millimeters of armor at 100 meters, 100 millimeters at 1,000 meters, and still 84 millimeters at 2,000 meters. Its effective range vastly outstripped any Allied tank gun of the era, meaning no Allied tank in 1942 could withstand a direct hit from the Tiger at typical combat distances, and no Allied tank gun could penetrate its frontal armor at any range. This created a new, stark imbalance on the battlefield. Adolf Hitler harbored a profound personal obsession with the Tiger. He had dictated the prototype deadline for his own birthday and repeatedly intervened in deployment decisions. Against all military advice, he ordered the first Tigers into combat before they were truly ready, before crews were adequately trained, and before comprehensive maintenance procedures were fully established. On July 23, 1942, Hitler personally commanded the initial Tiger deployment to the Leningrad front. Schwer Panzerabteilung 502 received 4 tanks by mid-August. The battalion commander, Major Richard Marker, assessed the heavily forested, swampy terrain around Leningrad as entirely unsuitable for 57-ton vehicles. Roads could not support them, bridges would collapse under their weight, and the mud would simply swallow them. His warnings were dismissed. The order came directly from Hitler, leaving no room for argument. What ensued perfectly illustrated the trajectory of the Tiger's entire career. Upon arrival near MGA on August 29th, 3 of the 4 Tigers broke down before even reaching their assigned positions. Transmissions failed as mud packed between the intricate interleaved road wheels, and engines overheated under the strain. Only Major Marker's own tank remained operational. When the Tigers finally entered combat in late September, the outcome was disastrous. All 4 vehicles were either knocked out or immobilized, though none suffered armor penetration. Their destruction was attributable to their own mechanical failures, the impossible terrain, and the impatience of commanders unwilling to wait for suitable conditions. General Heinz Guderian's subsequent assessment was damning. The result included not only heavy and unnecessary casualties, but also the critical loss of secrecy and the element of surprise for future operations. Major Marker, who had accurately predicted the disaster, was relieved of his command for his troubles. He had been proven correct in every aspect, yet it ultimately made no difference. By January 1943, Soviet forces had captured a Tiger almost fully intact. It was promptly shipped to the Kubinka testing facility outside Moscow, where engineers spent months meticulously analyzing its every weakness, preparing countermeasures for when Tigers eventually appeared in greater numbers. The Tiger's combat debut in North Africa, however, presented a more promising initial picture. The first 3 Tigers arrived at Tunis on November 23, 1942, assigned to Schwer Panzerabteilung 501 under Major Hans-Georg Lutter. Their first engagement occurred at the Battle of Taburba on December 1, 1942. Here, the Tigers effortlessly destroyed M3 Lee tanks, their 88mm guns tearing through American armor at ranges where any return fire was futile. The Tiger's own armor proved impervious to everything the Allies could bring to bear. By December 5th, Allied forces had lost 55 tanks. The Tiger had emphatically announced its presence, creating a new and immediate threat to Allied forces. A persistent myth places Tigers at the center of the Battle of Kasserine Pass in February 1943, depicting them as smashing through American lines in what became the greatest American defeat of the North African campaign. In reality, General Jürgen von Arnim, cautious about risking his precious Tigers, refused to commit them to Rommel's Kasserine assault. They were deemed too valuable. However, Tigers were indeed central to the preceding Battle of Sidi Bouzid on February 14th and 15th. 6 Tigers from the 1st Company of Schwer Panzerabteilung 501 spearheaded the attack, alongside Panzer IIIs and IVs of the 10th Panzer Division. This 2-day engagement proved catastrophic for American forces. Combat Command A lost 44 tanks on the first day, and Combat Command C lost 46 of its 52 Shermans on the second. While Tigers initially received much of the credit, later analysis by the Dupa Institute indicated that most Shermans were actually destroyed by medium panzers hitting their flanks and rears, rather than by direct frontal fire from Tigers. Kasserine Pass itself was predominantly fought with Panzer IIIs and IVs, rather than the elusive heavy tanks. The most significant Tiger defeat in Africa occurred at Hunt's Gap during Operation Oxenkopf between February 26th and March 4th, 1943. Here, the British had learned from their previous costly encounters. They meticulously prepared a killing zone with interlocking fields of fire, channeling attacking armor into predetermined kill boxes with minefields. Concealed 6-pounder anti-tank guns lay in wait, while hull-down Churchill tanks provided mobile firepower. Pre-registered artillery positions could saturate any grid square within seconds, and Hurricane tank busters circled overhead, poised to strike. 7 Tigers were destroyed in a single engagement, representing nearly 90% of the committed Tigers. This engagement marked the first clear demonstration that the Tiger, despite its power, could be defeated through coordinated combined arms tactics. Tiger 131 was captured on April 24, 1943, at point 174 during Operation Vulcan. A 6-pounder round struck its 88mm gun barrel at an angle, ricocheted, and then slammed into the turret ring, completely jamming the traverse mechanism. 2 additional hits wounded crew members. The Tiger, unable to rotate its turret, was rendered combat ineffective. The German unit diary, in a display of remarkable disdain, recorded the incident. Crew members of Tiger 131 panicked and abandoned the tank after 2 harmless hits from a Churchill. The hits were, in fact, far from harmless. Today, Tiger 131 stands as the sole operational Tiger I in the world, fully restored and maintained at the Tank Museum in Bovington, England. Visitors can witness its engine running, hear the distinctive rumble of its Maybach, and begin to understand the terror it once inspired. On the Eastern Front, 146 Tigers participated in the monumental Battle of Kursk in July 1943, a small fraction of the approximately 2,500 German tanks committed to that offensive. The Tiger was simply too rare and too valuable to risk in vast numbers. These heavy tanks typically formed the spearhead of the Panzer keel, or armored wedge, leading attacking formations. Their heavy armor absorbed Soviet fire, protecting the more vulnerable Panzer IIIs and IVs following behind, a role to which they were perfectly suited, absorbing hits that would devastate lesser tanks and continuing to advance. German unit claims from Kursk were astonishing. Schwer Panzerabteilung 503, for instance, reported hundreds of kills while losing only 8 Tigers during the offensive and subsequent withdrawal. Such figures fueled the growing Tiger legend. However, these numbers are known to be heavily inflated. The German High Command itself, acknowledging the common chaos of combat overcounting, applied a 50% reduction to unit kill claims from July 1943 onward. Even with this reduction, German claims frequently exceeded confirmed Soviet tank losses in the same battles. A more realistic Tiger kill ratio, carefully cross-referenced against enemy records and accounting for systematic overcounting, likely fell in the range of 2.5 to 3.5 to 1. While still impressive for any weapon, this was a far cry from the legendary 10 to 1 ratio perpetuated in popular histories and video games. Against earlier Soviet armor, the Tiger possessed an undeniable advantage. The T-34 with its 76mm gun and the KV-1 could not penetrate the Tiger's frontal armor at normal combat distances. Tiger crews could engage from 1,500 meters, well beyond Soviet effective range, and pick off enemy tanks with impunity. This advantage, however, was temporary. It shifted dramatically with the arrival of new Soviet weapons specifically designed to eliminate Tigers. The IS-2 heavy tank, mounting a massive 122mm gun, the largest caliber weapon on any production tank of the war, could threaten the Tiger's front from 1,500 meters, its shells often tearing turrets completely off their mounts. The Su-152 and ISU-152 assault guns, nicknamed Zverboy or Beast Killer, carried a 152mm gun whose shells could blow a Tiger's turret clean off with a single impact. Soviet crews proudly painted kill rings on their barrels, a testament to their shifting fortunes. The most famous Tiger engagement of the war would occur on June 13, 1944, at Villers-Bocage in Normandy, 1 week after the D-Day landings. SS Obersturmführer Michael Wittmann led what became perhaps the most celebrated single-tank action in history. The British 7th Armored Division, the Desert Rats, who had first faced both Grants and Tigers in North Africa, had exploited a gap in the German lines west of Caen. They were unaware that Wittmann's 2nd Company of Schwer SS Panzerabteilung 101 had just completed a grueling night march for Beauvais. Forced detours meant a road distance exceeding 240 kilometers. His crews were exhausted, and he commanded only 5 or 6 operational Tigers. Yet they lay directly in the British path. At approximately 9 a.m., Whitman observed the British column stretched along Route Nationale 175, vehicles moving nose to tail, completely oblivious to the impending danger. He did not await orders, nor did he coordinate with other units. He attacked alone. His Tiger emerged onto the road and engaged the rearmost British tanks, beginning with the Cromwell. The Cromwell crews had no warning. Whitman's 88mm gun fired repeatedly. Tanks erupted into flames, infantry carriers ground to a halt, and chaos swiftly engulfed the column. Whitman then drove directly into Villers-Bocage itself, his Tiger roaring down the main street, obliterating vehicles as he advanced. He destroyed 3 of 4 British headquarters Cromwell tanks before organized resistance finally materialized. A Sherman Firefly managed at least 1 hit on his tank, and then a 6-pounder anti-tank gun disabled his Tiger near the town's eastern exit, jamming its suspension. Whitman abandoned his immobilized vehicle and escaped on foot, navigating through British lines to rejoin German positions. Conservative estimates credit him with 13 to 14 tanks and 13 to 15 transport vehicles destroyed in roughly 15 minutes of intense combat. German propaganda, however, inflated these figures, attributing all 27 British tank losses that day solely to Whitman, even though multiple German units had participated. From this, the legend grew. Whitman was awarded the swords to his Knight's Cross. What popular histories often omit is the subsequent events of that same afternoon. The British launched a powerful counterattack, destroying 6 Tigers and several Panzers, substantially reversing the German gains of the morning by evening. The complete story, therefore, is far more intricate than the propaganda version suggested. Historian John Buckley contends that many historians continue to uncritically reiterate the narrative created by German wartime propaganda, a myth that served German wartime objectives and has continued to serve publishers and filmmakers ever since. Whitman himself was killed on August 8, 1944, near Saint-Étienne-de-Crampesnil during Operation Totalize. He had led 7 Tigers across open ground in broad daylight, violating every principle of armored warfare he had learned. Caught in a crossfire between the 1st Northamptonshire Yeomanry to the northeast and the Canadian Sherbrooke Fusiliers to the west, his Tiger's ammunition detonated, blowing off the turret and instantly killing the entire crew. The tank that had terrorized Allied forces for months was reduced to burning wreckage in mere seconds. The identity of the fatal shot's origin remains debated. Trooper Joe Ekins of the Northamptonshire Yeomanry, firing a Sherman Firefly from 800 to 1,200 meters, is the traditional claimant. However, Canadian historian Brian Reed argues the Sherbrooke Fusiliers possessed a more advantageous angle of fire at closer range. Both units claimed the kill. The precise truth died with Whitman. His remains were discovered during road construction in March 1983 and reinterred at La Camp German War Cemetery, where thousands of German soldiers from the Normandy campaign rest. By December 1944, production of the Tiger I had ceased, the last unit rolling off the Henschel line in August. The Ardennes Offensive, known as the Battle of the Bulge, saw the deployment of the Tiger II, also referred to as the King Tiger. This 70-ton behemoth, even more powerful than its predecessor, mounted a longer 88mm gun with superior penetration. Yet, it suffered from even greater mechanical unreliability. Schwer SS Panzerabteilung 501 attached its King Tigers to Kampfgruppe paper for the offensive through the frozen Ardennes forests. The ensuing events starkly highlighted the flaws in German heavy tank doctrine. A dozen King Tigers never even left their assembly area due to mechanical failures. Transmissions broke, engines seized. Crews toiled through freezing nights in a desperate attempt to render their tanks operational. Only 6 managed to follow paper towards the front, and these broke down repeatedly along the way. By December 23rd, trapped near the village of La Glise and critically low on fuel and ammunition, Paper ordered his men to abandon their vehicles and withdraw on foot through American lines. They left behind 6 King Tigers, 13 Panthers, 6 Panzer IVs, and more than 50 other vehicles. The largest concentration of German armor committed to the offensive sat frozen and abandoned in a Belgian village. One of those King Tigers, Tiger 213, was famously acquired after the war by a local Belgian innkeeper, Madame Jenny Hernandez, for a single bottle of cognac. It remains displayed at La Glise to this day, a tangible monument to mechanical failure. The Tiger's ultimate failure was not tactical, but strategic. In individual combat, it was often dominant, but in the cold mathematics of industrial warfare, it was thoroughly crushed. Germany produced 1,347 Tiger is between August 1942 and August 1944. According to the official German crew manual, the Tiger Fibel, each one demanded approximately 300,000 man-hours across the entire industrial supply chain, from steel mills to Maybach's engine plants to Henschel's final assembly line. Each cost 250,800 Reichsmarks at base price, rising to around 300,000 fully equipped. In that same period, American factories produced 49,324 M4 Sherman tanks. Each Sherman required significantly fewer man-hours to build and cost between $33,000 and $50,000, depending on the variant and production run. At its peak production in April 1944, Henschel built 104 Tigers per month, absorbing immense resources. Simultaneously, American factories produced nearly 2,000 Shermans monthly. The monthly ratio was roughly 20-1. One Tiger consumed enough resources to build more than 6 Shermans, or enough steel for 21 artillery pieces that could have supported infantry across multiple fronts. Historian Stephen Zaloga calculated that for the cost of 3 Tigers, Germany could have fielded 10 Sturmgeschütz, 3 assault guns. Factoring in the Tiger's dismal reliability, this translated to 7 operational assault guns versus perhaps 1 operational Tiger. The assault guns might have made a decisive difference. The Tigers ultimately never could. The Tiger's 57 metric tons overwhelmed its own engineering. Every system within the tank was pushed beyond its intended design limits. Fuel consumption was catastrophic. On roads, a Tiger burned 432 liters per 100 kilometers. Cross-country, that figure rose to 675 liters. Its 569-liter fuel tank provided a practical range of only 125 kilometers on roads, even less off-road. In the fuel-starved conditions of late-war Germany, where synthetic oil plants were relentlessly targeted by Allied bombers, this proved crippling. The final drives and transmissions struggled to reliably handle the immense weight under combat stress. Preventive maintenance was not merely recommended, it was mandatory. Without it, mechanical failure was almost guaranteed. German manuals explicitly detailed how many kilometers a Tiger could travel before major components required servicing. Crews who ignored these limits invariably found themselves stranded on enemy territory with broken tanks. The interleaved road wheels, which contributed to the Tiger's smooth ride, became a deadly trap in the Russian winter. Mud, ice, and snow would freeze solid between the overlapping wheels overnight, completely immobilizing the vehicle. German crews learned to park on wooden planks whenever possible, but often no planks were available. Soviet troops quickly adapted, launching attacks at dawn before German crews could free their frozen Tigers. At 57 tons, Tigers could not cross standard European bridges, typically rated for 35 tons. Any attempt meant a Tiger at the bottom of a river. Standard German recovery half-tracks proved useless for towing disabled Tigers. Only other Tigers, or multiple heavy vehicles working in concert, could move a broken-down unit. In retreat, this often became an impossible task. Rail transport itself presented a logistical nightmare, requiring the removal of the wide, 3.72-meter combat tracks and the fitting of narrower transport tracks to fit the railroad loading gauge, a process involving hours of arduous labor. Specialized 80-ton flat cars were also necessary. Moving Tigers across Europe was a constant, debilitating logistical challenge. Lost statistics vividly illustrate the true story of German heavy armor. Of 1,238 recorded Tiger-I losses documented by researcher Ron Klages. 43% were combat losses, tanks destroyed by enemy fire. A significant 36% were non-combat losses, attributable to mechanical failure, irrecoverable bogging in mud or swamp, fuel exhaustion, or deliberate destruction by their own crews to prevent capture. The remaining 21% were classified as unknown, captured, or lost to friendly fire. Remarkably, aircraft accounted for only about 2% of Tiger losses, effectively debunking the pervasive myth that Allied fighter bombers, the famous J-bows, destroyed Tigers in large numbers. The Tiger's armor was simply too thick for most aerial weapons. Air power's true devastation was indirect. Allied aircraft decimated fuel trucks, supply convoys, bridges, and rail infrastructure. This systemic destruction left Tigers stranded without fuel, ammunition, or spare parts. The most powerful tank in the world became utterly useless when it could not move, could not shoot, and could not be repaired. The legendary Tiger kill ratios were substantially inflated by wartime propaganda and later mythology. German unit records often claimed an aggregate 5-to-1 or 6-to-1 ratio across all Tiger battalions. These figures cannot be accurate. The German High Command's own intelligence branch applied a 50% reduction to unit kill claims from mid-1943 onward. Even after this reduction, German claims frequently exceeded confirmed enemy losses in the same battles. A more realistic Tiger kill ratio, meticulously cross-referenced against enemy records and accounting for systematic overcounting, was likely in the range of 2.5 to 3.5 to 1. Still an impressive figure for any weapon of war, but a considerable distance from the legendary 10:1 that still appears in popular histories and video games. The Allies developed a multifaceted response to the Tiger threat. Instead of seeking a single, equivalent counterweapon, they attacked the problem from every conceivable angle. The British 17-pounder, a 76.2mm anti-tank gun, could penetrate the Tiger's turret and driver's plate from 1,700 to 1,900 yards. When mounted in a Sherman hull, it became the Sherman Firefly, the designated Tiger killer in British armored units. Each troop of 4 Shermans included one Firefly, specifically tasked with engaging any Tigers encountered. The American 76mm Sherman replaced the original 75mm gun with a higher velocity weapon capable of penetrating the Tiger's frontal armor from a considerable distance. The M36 Jackson tank destroyer, mounting a 90mm gun, could defeat Tiger fronts at 1,000 meters. Entire tank destroyer battalions were held in reserve specifically to counter heavy armor threats. The Soviet IS-2, with its massive 122mm gun, could threaten Tiger fronts from 1,500 meters. At normal combat distances below 1,000 meters, any of these tanks could destroy the other. The Tiger's initial, overwhelming advantage had effectively vanished. Perhaps most significantly, infantry weapons and mines proved devastatingly effective against these heavy tanks. A British Army Operational Research Group study on German tank losses in Northwest Europe revealed telling results. Tanks accounted for 14.5% of losses, self-propelled guns and assault guns for another 24%, mines for 22%, anti-tank guns for 23%, and infantry hollow charge weapons like the Panzerfaust and Panzerschreck for 14%. The most effective countermeasure of all was often simply to refuse frontal engagement. By 1944, overwhelming Allied numerical superiority, combined arms doctrine, and complete air supremacy meant Tigers could be bypassed entirely, flanked, surrounded, cut off from supply, and starved of fuel. Heavy tanks, forced into retreat, often had to be destroyed by their own crews to prevent capture. The Tiger, in essence, became a weapon that consumed itself. The psychological impact of the Tiger was arguably its most potent weapon. The sheer terror it inspired often far exceeded the actual threat. Tiger phobia became so widespread that Allied troops frequently reported encounters with Tigers when they had actually faced Panzer IVs or Panthers. Only about 5% of German tanks operational at any given time were actually Tigers, yet in the minds of frightened soldiers, every German tank became one. General Dwight D. Eisenhower admitted in a private letter to General George C. Marshall in February 1943 that American forces did not yet know exactly how to handle the Mark VI tank, requesting more tank destroyer battalions and heavier guns. Corporal Francis Weiling of the 2nd Armored Division vividly captured the anguish felt by Sherman crews facing Tigers with inadequate weaponry. Lack of a principal gun with sufficient penetrating ability to knock out the German opponent has cost us more tanks and skilled men than any failure of our crews. Not to mention the heartbreak and sense of defeat I and other men have felt when we see 25 or even many more of our rounds fired, and they ricochet off the enemy attackers. Yet, they continued to fight, and they devised ways to prevail. German tanker Otto Carius, serving with Schwer Panzerabteilung 502, the very unit that suffered the Tigers' disastrous debut near Leningrad, had been twice rejected for military service as medically unfit due to being underweight before finally being drafted in May 1940. His most renowned action occurred at Mali Nava in Latvia on July 22, 1944. His battalion commander's after-action report credited him with 10 of the 17 enemy tanks confirmed destroyed that day. Carius's own memoir, however, claimed significantly higher numbers, but Soviet archival records from the area identified only 5 IS-2s and 10 T-34s present. This discrepancy between personal claims and documented losses was a common feature in the chaos of armored warfare, where multiple crews often claimed the same kill. After the war, Carius pursued studies in pharmacy at Heidelberg and eventually opened the Tiger Apotheke, the Tiger Pharmacy, in Hersbruck. He managed it for decades, becoming a minor celebrity among tank enthusiasts who traveled from around the world to visit. The perspective from inside a Sherman tank was often grim. According to Ordnance Officer Belton Cooper, the 3rd Armored Division began its Normandy campaign with 232 Shermans. By the war's conclusion, 648 had been completely destroyed and another 700 knocked out and subsequently repaired. This represented a staggering 580% loss rate across 231 days of intense combat. Staff Sergeant Lafayette G. Poole emerged as the top American Sherman ace, credited with destroying 258 enemy vehicles, including 12 tanks, in under 3 months. He lost a leg to a Panther round on September 19, 1944. Sherman crews, facing their formidable opponents, improvised desperately. White phosphorus rounds could temporarily blind Tiger optics, forcing crews to abandon their vehicles in the acrid smoke. Later production Shermans, with their improved wet ammunition stowage, dramatically enhanced survivability. The grim reality was encapsulated in a saying that circulated among American tankers. A Tiger could destroy 10 Shermans, but the Americans always have 11. Today, only approximately 7 Tiger is survive largely intact in museums worldwide. Tiger 131 at Bovington remains the only one still in running condition. Tiger 1212 resides at Fort Moore, formerly Fort Benning. The French Saumur Tank Museum hosts another, and the Kubinka Tank Museum in Russia displays the Tiger captured in 1943. Others sit in quieter repose at Leninosna Jurai, at Vimetiers, and at Munster. These rusting hulks stand as monuments to a philosophy of warfare that proved fatally flawed. Germany relentlessly pursued perfection in individual machines. Each Tiger was an engineering masterpiece, yet each demanded 6 times the resources of a Sherman to construct, and each broke down almost as frequently as it engaged in combat. The Allies, by contrast, pursued adequacy at scale. Every Sherman was deemed good enough. Every Sherman could be repaired in the field. Every Sherman that burned could be replaced by 2 more the following month. The Tiger undeniably won battles. The Sherman, produced 36 times over, won the war. The M3 Grant, which had so profoundly shocked German tankers at Gazala in May 1942, became obsolete within months. In fact, Even before its first combat engagement, by October 1941, it had already been reclassified as substitute standard as production of the M4 Sherman began. The Grant was never intended as a war winner. Its purpose was simply to buy time until a superior design could arrive. It fulfilled that limited, critical role. The Tiger, conversely, was conceived as the ultimate tank, a weapon so overwhelmingly powerful that it would decide the war through sheer technological dominance. Instead, it consumed resources Germany could not spare, broke down on roads that could not support its immense weight, and ran on fuel that eventually ceased to exist. A profound irony underpins this entire narrative. The M3 Grant, often credited in popular accounts as the catalyst for the Tiger's development, bore no actual relation to its creation. The Tiger's conception predated the Grant's combat debut, a fact demonstrably clear from the timelines. Yet, both tanks were, in their respective ways, born from a similar underlying dread, the realization that existing armored forces could not effectively counter the enemy. Both nations responded to this fear in ways that revealed their deepest strategic assumptions. America developed the M3 as a conscious compromise, acknowledging its flaws, but recognizing that an imperfect solution available today was preferable to a perfect one 2 years hence. When the Sherman was ready, they transitioned without sentiment. Germany, on the other hand, crafted the Tiger as a declaration of engineering supremacy. They could not accept a merely adequate tank. They demanded the best. They achieved it, and it bled them dry. In 1945, as American and Soviet tanks advanced into the heart of Germany, they encountered burned-out Tigers abandoned along the roadside. Many had not been destroyed by enemy fire. They had simply run out of fuel or succumbed to mechanical failure one final time, their crews setting them ablaze rather than allowing them to be captured. The most powerful tanks ever constructed, reduced to smoldering wreckage by their own inherent limitations. The M3 Grant served its purpose and was largely forgotten. The Tiger became a legend, yet ultimately lost the war. Germany produced its masterpiece 1,347 times. America built something that simply worked 49,324 times. The arithmetic proved merciless.